Hey guys, so welcome to these short little revision videos. I'm going to put them together for all the topics you cover in GCSE and that you need to know for your exams. We'll start right from the beginning today in this first video. Depending on what teacher you've had, you may have done it in a different order, but don't worry about that. So today you can see what we're going to look at: functions of the skeleton, classification of bones, labelling of skeleton, classification of joints, movement possibilities, and role of ligaments and tendons. If I go too fast, you can pause. If you think you've covered it very well, you can skip through. These videos are just for you to use as you see fit. You might want to have your revision guides with you, pen, paper, whatever you like, just to help you get the most from these little videos. So, how many bones do you know? Hopefully you recognise all these names of the bones and you're able to look at them and think, actually I know where they are on the body, I know which bone this is and that is, and I'm sure you remembered. You might have done this in class, depending on lockdown, etc. You might not have done. You might have done it studying from home. So if you want, you can pause and you can write all these down on post-its and stick them to your body, or you might use a brother or sister and have a go at this, or you can just carry on with me now and we'll go on to the next slide. So we're going to look at naming the bones on the skeleton. So we know the cranium is the skull, clavicle is your collarbone, so look at where the arrows are pointing to. Sternum is your breastbone, so in the middle of your chest. Ribs, we've got our humerus, our pelvis, radius, and ulna in the arm. Make sure you know which way round these are. So look at how the skeleton's facing. It's got its arms open and out. Its hands are open, not turned over. The femur, the long bone at the top of the leg. Patella in your kneecap. Got your tibia inside and the fibula on the outside. So if we look at the reverse of the body, so we've got the back of the body, looking at the back, we've got the scapula, the shoulder blades, and there's one on the other side of where the arrow is pointing. The vertebral column, so that's your spine, runs all the way up your back. And then we look at the hands, so the carpals in the wrist, and the metacarpals are towards your knuckles, the first long bit of your finger. Now look at the foot, you've got the tarsals at the top of the foot and the metatarsals running down towards your toes. And then the phalanges are what we would describe the actual bone of the toes or fingers. So there are 5 functions of the skeleton. Hopefully you remember them. Let's have a quick look through. We've got our protecting our vital organs. So like we looked at the cranium, that protects our brain, obviously super important. And there's other ones as well. We've got joints for movement, red and white blood cell production, storing calcium and phosphorus, which the body needs, and muscle attachment, which we will go through as we go through the presentation. So, protection of vital organs, like I just said, the cranium, the skull protects our brain, which is obviously really important. You know, we need our brain to be able to think. And then we looked at the ribs as well, so the series of bones running down the side of our chest, they protect the organs in our chest, like our lungs, our heart, things like that. So obviously super important role to protect our organs that we use. So there you go. Can you think of 2 reasons why the rib cage has gaps in it rather than being a solid shell of bone? Oops. Then the next reason is muscle attachment. So the bones work with the muscles to produce movement. So if we just had muscles, we wouldn't be able to move because we need the bones to move. And if we didn't have bones, we wouldn't be able to. If we didn't have muscles, we wouldn't be able to move the bones. So they're obviously very important for each other, the bones and muscles to work together. The muscles are attached to the bones by tendons. So you should know that. Muscles are attached to bones by tendons. And the bones have surfaces that allow for strong attachment. And these tendons fuse with the membrane on the outside of the bone and allow the tendons to be muscles to contract and extend. and this allows for movement, as you can see from the diagram below. So the red bit is the muscle, of course, then you've got your tendon attached to the bone. So the bone is the bottom bit with the little roots going in, as you can see. Well, the bone's just below the periosteum, sorry. Then we have our joints for movement. So key thing to remember here is joints are where two or bones meet. So two or more than two, 3 bones, 4 bones, etc. And these allow the body to make movements. So fine movements can be sort of small movements, just like holding something, a small movement. So that's a fine movement, like holding a javelin. Or they can be gross, so a big movement, like throwing a javelin. So you can see an example down here of the arm. You've got the humerus, the long top bone in the arm, and then you've got the radius and ulna. So there's 3 bones meeting there in that joint. Then we've got red and white blood cell production. So some of the bones in our bodies have hollow centres that hold bone marrow. Bone marrow is really important because it makes red blood cells, white blood cells and platelets. And hopefully from the other topics you've remembered how important red blood cells, white blood cells and platelets are. The red blood cells carry the oxygen we need to get to our working muscles, to help us exercise and move. Our white blood cells help destroy pathogens and keep us healthy. And then our platelets help us clot our blood, so if we get a cut we can clot the blood and not lose all our blood and die. So yeah, all very important, and that's why the function of the skeleton is really important. The bones store this marrow. They also store calcium and phosphorus, so you say it phosphorus, and these help us keep healthy, strong bones. And the best source of calcium is your dairy products. So if you have a nice glass of milk, or you have your milk with your cereal, you're getting some good input of calcium into your diet and into your body. Phosphorus also helps us reduce muscle pain, which is important for recovery. So if you haven't got a lot of phosphorus and you do exercise and your muscles are really sore the next day, if you have phosphorus in your diet, you won't be as sore and it will aid your recovery. And you can find that in things like milk and dairy products, meat, beans, lentils and nuts. So all these healthy foods. So you can just pause this on the screen and match them up to yourself. You can just number them 1 to 5 and then 1 to 5 on the other side and see if you can get them to match up. Once you're done, just play the video again and we'll go on to the answers. So we look on the left, protection of vital organs. Some of our body parts, such as the brain, are very delicate and need protection from external forces. So we looked at the cranium protects the brain, so the skull protecting the brain. We also looked at how the rib cage protects organs like the heart and lungs. And if we go down to number 2, we've got muscle attachment. So why is this important? So bones work with muscles to produce movement, and the muscles are attached to bones by tendons. So hopefully you remember the little diagram we looked at. And with the red muscle, the white tendon go into the top of the bone to the membrane. Then we've got joints for movement. So the joints allow the body to make movements. These movements can be fine, like we said, holding a javelin, or gross movements, or a larger movement like throwing the javelin. Number 4, red and white blood cell production. And remember, some bones store bone marrow, and this bone marrow makes red blood cells, white blood cells and platelets, and we discussed their uses just a moment ago. And then the final one that we just looked at, storing calcium and phosphorus. So the bones store calcium and phosphorus, and these can help us have strong bones. And we know the best source of these are dairy products. So if you remember milk, they're really good. And also phosphorus can come from lentils, beans, meat products. So we've looked at the function of the skeleton. Hopefully that's refreshed your memory and filled in any gaps. So if you want to have a go at these, just pause the screen and you can have a look. So hopefully you've had a look and now you're ready to move on. So these are just some sentence starters. If you get asked the question, state how each function aids successful sports performance. So you can see how each of the 5 elements has some sentences you can use. Hopefully you've read through those and had a look. So we know the 5 main functions by now: protect the vital organs, allow muscles to attach for movement, create joints so you can move, store calcium and phosphorus, red blood cell, white blood cell, and platelet production. So the question here is explain how the skeletal system works using Tom Daley's dive as a scenario. So some of you might know who Tom Daley is, some of you might not. He's probably the most famous diver from Team GB in the Olympics, and he's done really well in the World Championships as well. He's really successful, really famous. So how do the skeleton functions help Tom Daley as a diver? Look at what the question's asking you. It's asking him, when he does his dive, how the skeletal system works. So he's diving from quite a big height. It might be a 5 metre or 10 metre platform, and he's going to hit the water. A lot of the time he'll be going in head first. So the first thing we looked at was protect the vital organs, and his cranium is going to be super important in this scenario because it's protecting his brain from the impact into the water. So the muscles attach to the skeleton to allow his movement to occur. So he does a lot of somersaults. He might start in a handstand, then tuck his knees in to do a backflip and then dive into the water. So the muscles attaching to the skeleton allow this movement to occur. The joints create movement. So look, he's got his hands extended at the moment. That's joints allowing movement in the wrist. And then when he goes into the dive position, when you dive, you put your hands sort of on top of each other, pointing down at the water, going straight. So joints also allow that movement. We know that calcium and phosphorus are important in the bones to keep them healthy and strong. Obviously, if he's hitting the water, he needs to have strong bones. He also needs strong bones to be able to support his weight and do a handstand at the start. So that's another important function of the skeletal system for Tom Daley to do a dive. And then finally, if he's doing diving, he's doing exercise, he's doing handstands and he's doing somersaults, he needs to have good oxygen delivery to his working muscles, so the muscles in his arms, in his core, in his legs. And he obviously will get that from the red blood cells, and that will give him energy to perform his dive. So that's how a diver, like Tom Daley, uses a skeletal system. So you can see how important the system is in a sport like diving. Now we're going to look at the back. So the vertebral column we looked at earlier, also known as the vertebrae, which are there are five sections of the spine, which is also the vertebral column or vertebrae. So at the top you've got the cervical, the top bit between sort of the bottom of your head down to the start of your neck. Then you've got the main part of the spine, the really long bit running between your ribs, all the way from the top to the bottom of your ribs, the thoracic. Then you've got the lower part of your back, lumbar. Then just below your pelvis, you've got the sacrum. Sorry, above your pelvis, you've got the sacrum. And then the last bit, towards the top of your bum, you've got the coccyx. Okay, so that's the 5 parts of the vertebrae. And you can see with each one, they have a number. So that's how many vertebrae are in that part of the vertebral column. I know it's a bit confusing with all the numbers and the different ways of saying it. So a vertebrae is an individual part of the spine. As you can see, the little indents going down, that's a vertebrae. Okay. And that's what we're going to look at today. And then I'll put the next video below this one so you'll know what to look at next.